All right. Hello, everyone. This is Demarcus Worsing. I'm a student at UMBC. I am taking a machine learning and data analysis class, 602. This will be our first project. Um, our first project is actually on either linear regression or classifications. I chose to do my project based on a linear regression and a decision tree classification comparison. So, further ado, let me just introduce my project. I will be trying to predict cardiovascular disease positivity and negativity within a data set that I gathered from Kaggle. So just some goals slash objectives from the current report that I'm running. I want to explore cardiovascular or CVD features in relations to themselves and to the cardiovascular case of positive and negative results, as well as a model comparison for comparing two very commonly used classification models for their accuracy, which would be logistic regression and decision tree classifications as well. Here's just a snapshot of the features slash target that I'll be using. The features will be the age of a person, how much they weigh, the gender, which would be either female or male, woman or man, um, the AP high, AP low, which is the systolic blood pressure and the dystolic blood pressure, as well as cholesterol. For the cholesterol, they'll be numbered 1, 2, and 3, 1 being normal, 2 being above normal, 3 being well above normal, as well as glucose. Again, the same thing follows, 1 being normal, 2 being above normal, and 3 being well above normal. And then I will be taking BMI. The BMI did not come with the data set. I calculated it with the height and weight. Um, and all the features that you do see here are all features that are highly correlated with the target, which is trying to predict whether a person will develop a cardiovascular disease. And for the target, it is cardiovascular. You'll see it's represented with a 0, which is no, so a negative, and represented with a 1, a positive, meaning you will have it. So just to give some background on CVD, CVD does stands for cardiovascular disease. It is a group of conditions that involves the heart and the blood vessels of the body. Common complications of this disease can cause chest pain, strokes, and more commonly heart attacks. Um, it is stated that actually one person does die every 30 seconds from CVD in the United States. And currently, CVD is a leading cause of death in the United States, more than all deaths from cancer. And the number of lives lost is actually increasing year after year. There has been studies showed that in 2030 and years after 2030, over 1 million people in the United States could die each year from CVD alone. All right. And just to speak about the data set a little bit further, I did provide a link for the cardiovascular data set that I'm using. You click on this link, it will take you to Kaggle. Um, so the data set that I do have, it currently does have 70,000 entries with 13 different attributes. Again, those attributes are contain some of the features that I'll be using, as well as other features. And again, I'm not using all 13 attributes or columns because uh, the correlation was under 0.05, and the recommended use for any feature is to be over a correlation of 0.05. Um, each entry is actually unique to its counterparts, so not one entry is the same. Each entry does contain different health levels. For an example, your cholesterol level could be a 3, your weight in kilograms could be 120, as well as you being diagnosed with a 1, meaning positive, of having cardiovascular disease. And like I said, all 12 columns are measured towards the cardio column, which then determines if you do have the disease or not. Now, there are some columns that do show lower levels of health metrics from a person that doesn't have cardiovascular versus someone that does. So it varies on the person. All right. So now we have some findings from the report. Several visualizations were ran regarding this. The first one that we'll talk about is the women versus men for the actual diagnosis of cardiovascular. We can see here 0 is represented for women and 1 is represented for men. We can see here clearly a very significant numbers within the women population versus the man population. We can see that women either have the disease or does not have the disease is over 20,000 entries versus a man's diagnosis, which is a little over 10,000 for either it's positive or negative. Now, if we look over to the right, we can see that this will be taken in account of the glucose level per gender and if they actually have the disease or not. We can see that for glucose level 1, for both men and women are pretty high. For 2 and 3, they're barely cracking over 2,500 for the men and women. But again, the women graph, it does show a significant increase than the man's graph, which is a little concerning and could lead to more investigation as to why women actually have higher counts of report of negative to positive cases of this disease. All right. And for the report continued, we have another graph just showing us the age breakdown for both men and women. If you look clearly at the women, you can see that from the ages of 50 to 65, there's a substantial increase in actual positive cases of the disease and a lower trending down of negative cases. So we can see that, so basically the older, which it does make sense that the older you get, the more risk of you actually contracting the disease versus actually reporting negative. And if you want to further look into it, you can see that it does start even before 50 at the age of 40, a slow increase. So from 40 to roughly 60, so from 40 to age 60, there's a steady increase of positive cases for COVID. Whereas negative cases, there's kind of stagnant from the age of 40, then drops to 49, but then skyrockets back up at 50 to 51, and then slowly decrease down onwards to 65. The same can be said for the men's graph. However, again, you're seeing very low amounts of reports of negative and positive cardiovascular disease. So what you can lead from here is you can see that most likely, and you would probably have to do more research, that women are more susceptible to the disease and they are get and receive more testing than men. All right, so now over to the model findings. Again, the models that I'll be comparing is the logistics regression model versus the decision tree. The first is a breakdown of a training data set and a test data set. The training data set reported a 71% accuracy of of actually finding negative to positive cardiovascular disease cases. We can see that for the true values for negative, we got 18,676 matches uh, versus the 5,892 fails, which were categorized as positive, which then failed because they were actually negative. And the same can be said with the actual positive values being found versus the 8,000 that were thought to be negative but are actually positive. And the same can be said for the test. Now, something very significant with the test is you can see that there is an increase in actual testing accuracy than there is for the training accuracy. So from there, what I would possibly might do is increase the sample size for the test just to see if I can get a better accuracy from running the logistic regression. Um, but it's real interesting how the test data set does not um, show below under the training data set. All right, and then we have the decision tree classification for this one. Again, same as the logistic regression model, um, but it's a higher value for the training and testing data sets. They both show over 73%. So a 2% increase from the actual logistic regression model. Um, we can see that there was just a 500 plus match versus the testing and training set from the previous model. Now, with that being said, comparing the two models, I am actually seeing a better performance in identifying positive and negative cases of CVD. This is shown in the decision tree classifier than the actual logistic regression that was ran. Now, for the decision tree model, all three precision, recall, and the F1 score percentages are better than the logistic model by 2%. Um, However, with this being said, the disease is a leader in American deaths from what we learned so far. So having an accuracy of positive and negative cases being at 71 to 73% isn't really helpful since it is a very important disease that is actually causing a lot of deaths. We would want to have an accuracy threshold between 95 to actually 97% of trying to predict CVD cases from from health levels. So from that, I would have to either gain a little bit more insights or contain or gather a little bit more insight or gather actually more health metrics for each different case, just so that we can strengthen the model for causations of actual CVD. And that will be all for this presentation. Thank you for listening. And again, thank you for listening to the presentation. You can find this presentation on my GitHub. My GitHub will be www.github.com/marcusw0602 at data 602 intro data analysis and machine learning. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.